Well, Taylor, a dash of chaos, that is a great phrase and describes the United States Congress. So, well, thank you all for joining us this afternoon, and thank you for being flexible. That is much appreciated. I'm G.T. Thompson, Republican leader of the House Agriculture Committee, and I'm pleased to have my colleague Austin Scott of Georgia's 8th Congressional District with me today to chat with you all about broadband connectivity and how important it is in our rural communities. Now, due to a scheduling conflict, Michelle Fischbach was no longer able to join us, but I want to give her a special shout out. She's our newly appointed ranking member of the Commodity Exchanges Energy and Credit Subcommittee, and I'm confident that our work that she is leading is in good hands. Now, Austin's input was critical in the 2018 Farm Bill. I'm so appreciative of the work that he did and his leadership as we navigated broadband negotiations. And I'm looking forward to him sharing his perspective in just a few moments. The pandemic further exposed the need to close the digital divide for rural America. In the most recent reconciliation package, House Republicans sought to reframe the debate and ensure rural connectivity was at the table. Now, despite these views, both Republicans and even some Democrats were cut out of the debate. Our Democrat colleagues moved forward with trillions in new spending without prioritizing rural needs. Now, today, House Agriculture Republicans introduced the Broadband for Rural America Act, one of several proposals House Republicans that bridge the digital divide for communities nationwide. In the 2018 Farm Bill, the House and Senate worked to reform the suite of rural broadband programs at the USDA. The Broadband for Rural America Act provides more than $6.5 billion in new authorizations in broadband connectivity programs through the department, which has, I have to say, USDA is a department that has the expertise, the experience, quite frankly, the infrastructure and the reach necessary to close the digital divide. Now, prior to the call, you should have also received a summary that will paint a bigger picture of the bill, but I wanted to highlight a few points in particular. The Broadband for Rural America Act, first of all, authorizes $3.7 billion per year for critical rural broadband programs, including the Reconnect Rural Broadband Program, the Middle Mile Broadband Program, and the Innovative Broadband Advancement Program. Next, it targets limited resources, so assistance is focused on the most rural and least connected residents, which are often the most expensive to connect. And finally, it promotes borrower accountability and protects taxpayers with new tools to ensure promised services are delivered to rural communities. Now, the Broadband for Rural America Act is the responsible path forward to bridging the digital divide. It prioritizes the needs of rural communities, and it's a step in the right direction as we begin to rebound into a resurgent post-COVID economy. Now, I'll stop there because I know that we'd all like to hear from Mr. Scott before jumping into the Q&A portion. But if you take one message away from this afternoon's call, let it be this. With continued investments in broadband, we can empower farm families, better serve rural America, and fuel global economies. Now, that's our battle cry as agriculture Republicans as we continue this effort to better serve rural communities with reliable connectivity. And with that, I'm really pleased to turn this over to a good friend and colleague, Mr. Austin Scott, for any remarks that he'd like to share.
Well, thank you, GT. I appreciate you and your leadership and the staff and their leadership on this issue, and look forward to continuing to work towards a solution here that a solution where I don't have to pay overages to Verizon because I'm using my cell phone to link to the internet instead of the AT&T service that I pay for at my home. I represent all or part of 24 counties in the state of Georgia. I live on the border of two of those counties, Tifton, Turner, and 15 miles to the north, you have access to high-speed internet, and 15 miles to the south, you have access to high-speed internet. But for those of us who live in between the cities, we have significant challenges with everything from our kids' homework to simply doing day-to-day bill paying and other things. So the key aspect to me of this piece of legislation that is different from others is what I would refer to as the fast forward funding It is the 3.7 billion a year for 2 years that we're going to put into the USDA. I think it's important for rural America that the money goes to the USDA and not to the Federal Communication Commission. There's some talk at the Federal Communication Commission of changing the speed from 25 to 100 megabytes is what people are considered to be high speed. We in rural America want to make sure that we get to that 25 megabytes prior to the expansion to 100. And by putting the money in the USDA, we feel like the focus of the funds will end up being in that expansion to rural America. We're all using more bandwidth today than we have in the past. I think that bandwidth will continue to increase exponentially. And again, that just makes it more important for us to get this done sooner than later. There are provisions in this bill that have been authorized through previous farm bills. One of those is a provision called the middle mile. The middle mile is what I would refer to as the on-ramp, if you will, from rural America to where the high-speed internet actually is. So that provision is in here. The authorization is in here. And as sometimes happens, what we authorize in the farm bill did not get funded through the Appropriations Committee. So hopefully that will get done this time. But again, a lot of work has gone into this. A lot of people deserve a lot of credit. Happy to be a part of what I hope is a great solution for rural America. And I'll turn it back over to you, GT, or Taylor, or whoever's going to handle the call.
Thank you, Austin. Now let's get started with the questions.
Sure. Thank you both for your opening remarks. Our first question is from Tony St. James from All Ag All Day out of Texas. He asked, he mentioned rather, that it seems as though some of the rural areas that want to participate in improving broadband just don't know where to start. Maybe it's a lack of not knowing the first step or not understanding how to push the rock off the cliff. Any thoughts on how members of a community can take the lead?
Well, Tony, great question, because we can put forward righteous legislation, have it implemented and converted from legislation into programs where people are not able to, if communities can't access them, then they're all for nothing, right? I mean, it's a part of what we do, the process. These programs are perfect though for being accessed because USDA has a presence in every county through our NRCS offices, FSA, even what I would call some of the cousins of USDA, like our cooperative extensions, which are part of our land grant universities, that would be able to help people navigate. I'm sure that would help make referrals. I would also hope that all communities every community is represented with a member of Congress, and I know that's a role that those of us who serve on the Agriculture Committee are very. I mean, we want to be facilitators and help connect. So there's a host of avenues out there to make ultimately to have this access occur in every county in the United States of America.
My only add to that would be that I think by putting the funds into the USDA, and again, by the fast forwarding aspect of this, is that people will know to go to the USDA, and it should be easier for rural America, who's used to working with the USDA, to work through them than the Federal Communication Commission to get those funds to, whether it's the local EMC or a city or a county government or a state cooperation that helps us get this done. I think by having the money in the USDA, it's going to allow the people to work through it a lot easier.
That's a great segue into our second question from John Hendel of Politico. The FCC also administers billions in subsidies aimed at rural broadband. Is there any concern about duplicating these efforts by authorizing so much additional rural broadband spending at USDA? How should the federal government balance the broadband roles for these two agencies and others?
Well, we've actually been working on that for some time. That's incredibly important because there's not, as trying to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollar while being good stewards of rural America and meeting needs. We can't afford duplication. There's not enough resources out there, nor is it appropriate. It's wasteful. And so starting with the 2018 Farm Bill, or at least the 2018 Farm Bill was a big part of this, we made it very clear of laying out, for as opposed to duplication, we wanted synergy. We didn't want wasteful spending and duplication. And so the 2018 Farm Bill, and Austin as I mentioned before, was a great leader in this space when we were putting that Farm Bill together, making sure that we put those guidelines in place, so those guardrails, so that people would, we could have them stay in their own lane and not have the duplication. And what I think is just wasteful spending, because if you waste $1 on this, that's $1 of an end user, somebody in the last mile that's even less likely to be able to get connected. And this bill that we put together actually reinforces that. It brings forth that those principles. I don't know, Austin, with your work in the last Farm Bill, you want to speak the importance of that and why we put what we did within that 2018 Farm Bill?
Yeah, so I think the agreeing with everything GT said, I think the bottom line is, for those of us who actually live in rural America, the FCC's had their chance and they haven't gotten it done. And there are millions of people that live in the metropolitan areas of the world. And there are also millions of us who live in rural America. And the FCC has concentrated on the areas where the population is the densest. And USDA serves rural America where the population density is not as great. And so again, I would say, as one of the people who's personally impacted by this, the Federal Communication Commission has had their chance, and I can go 15 miles north or I can go 15 miles south and I have access to high-speed internet. But where I live in the actual rural part of the county, there is no service there. So we're continuing to use more and more bandwidth. The FCC's had their chance. Let's do this fast forward funding through the USDA, and let's let the USDA, who rural America is used to working with, just like we're used to working with EMCs and others, let's give them a chance to provide this service to us that candidly nobody else has done, and they've had their chance.
Thank you both. Our next question is from Jackie at Farm Progress. Did anything from the recent House Ag Broadband hearing guide any of the provisions included? Do you have any bipartisan support for this bill, or are there similar bills proposed by Democrats?
Great question. First of all, absolutely. A lot of what we heard at that hearing, and it was, I think, and we heard this from both Republicans and Democrats. We heard this from our witnesses. We worked hard to take that feedback and to look at. We wanted to make sure that we, that we really address that last mile and where important middle mile, where those were things that were all emphasized in that hearing. We heard that from different witnesses. The fact is that we need to address innovation, and the hearing, for those, and most of you probably watched and observed that, we had a great example of an economic development group that basically working with dirigibles or blimps in Indiana, serving many different counties. Just a very innovative way of providing broadband connectivity using a technology that we really hadn't seen before. And so that, innovation, middle mile, last mile, we heard about how important it was in terms of speed, and 25.3 is what's specified, which is great, but that's kind of the minimum. That's the floor. We're encouraging as high as connectivity as possible. And so, and quite frankly, it was important and reinforced that, as the last person that asked question, avoiding duplication, to make sure that we had synergy between the agencies and we're not wasteful with this, that we're doing our best to reach as many homes as absolutely possible. Currently, we just dropped this bill, and we have 22 original co-sponsors on the bill. They are all Republican at this point, but I don't expect that to stay that long for very long. Again, the ink's not dry on this bill being introduced today. And so it's got all the ingredients that I'm looking at this as the Broadband for Rural America Act to be a very strong bipartisan bill. And looking forward to working with Chairman David Scott, the chairman of the full committee, on this as well. But at this point, it's fairly new. This is something that the Republican members have been working on and putting form to. So at this point in time, of the 22 that have original co-sponsors, they are all Republican at this point.
I don't have anything to add to that. I think we will have bipartisanship on this, and certainly it is the rural America representatives that seem to be the most willing to work across the aisle and find a solution. So I feel good about having additional co-sponsors that are Democrats on this.
Our next question is from Ben at AgriPulse. Speaking of bipartisan support, what are the chances of this getting into Biden's infrastructure package?
Well, that's up to the president, I guess. I would think this would be an incredibly smart thing to put into an infrastructure package. The initial offering that President Biden offered, which was I think close to over $2 trillion. There was less than 5% of that $2 trillion had anything to do with rural broadband and connectivity. And so, but there was a marker there for it. It was largely focused on. I really don't think it was focused on rural America because I don't think any of those resources were committed towards USDA. It was more the Commerce Department, and we know, quite frankly, USDA is the one again that has the expertise. They've got the staff, they've got the infrastructure, and the will to be able to connect rural America. So this would. Let me just say this bill would be a great addition to any infrastructure package. I know the Republican conference is working not just those of us in the Agriculture Committee. This is our contribution, but I know that Energy and Commerce and Transportation Infrastructure Committee Republicans are working very hard at putting together proposals. I think these proposals these are the kind of the fruits of the labors that we're doing as Republicans. These are, I guess I'll stay with that analogy. These are ripe for being bipartisan, coming out of all three of the committees. Certainly the Agriculture Committee.
I would hope it would be bipartisan, and I don't, we've got what I think will be a bipartisan bill that's going to move with regard to chip manufacturing in the United States. I think it would be probably more likely that something like this would be done in a bipartisan manner, focused on broadband than on infrastructure as a whole, but would be very happy to see President Biden put it in this infrastructure package if he's willing to.
Thank you both. And I have what I believe is our last question from Clint Thompson at AgNet Media. I think it's a good closer for this discussion. From an agricultural perspective, how important is this bill to the future of farming?
Oh, it's incredibly important. Agriculture from the very first days has been about science, technology, and innovation. And I mean those first individuals who worked the ground, planted seeds, tried to grow enough money just to survive for them and their family for a year. Now, the science and technology was very crude and rudimentary. It was mostly trial and error. They would try different things until they were able to grow more to be able to sustain life. And today, agriculture today is very sophisticated in terms of science, technology, and innovation. So this is when you look at we just look at precision agriculture and the application of precision agriculture, that requires connectivity, and there's so much can be accomplished there in terms of managing both efficiency, productivity. There's obviously positive economic outcomes. There's positive climate outcomes, and then the scope of the Agriculture Committee goes beyond the bounds of just our food, our fiber, energy resources, and building materials. It's about the rural economy, right? It's about rural communities, and we all know after what we've experienced in 2020 with this pandemic, the importance of having connectivity for teleeducation, telehealth, commerce, the ability for our farms to be able to connect with a worldwide market, to be able to sell into using connectivity and using the internet. They're just such an important part of our life, and I will say that what we're doing is overdue with the Broadband for Rural America Act. We're finally breaking that paradigm of we've been constant for many years of limping along when it comes to rural connectivity. But if we would have done that same pace back in the 1930s when it comes to electrifying rural America, I'm afraid my hometown would still be in the dark because it was piecemeal. And I think this Broadband for Rural America Act really gives it that emphasis, that front loading, forward investment for the first 2 years, which leads us right into the next farm bill in 2023. Gives us we have to reauthorize our programs. It's a chance to improve them, refine them, learn what's working, not working, and to continue and complete that progress of ending the digital divide.
Yeah, so I think agreeing very much, with what GT said. It's about the quality of life in rural America. I FaceTime with my wife and kids every night, and more oftentimes than not, that FaceTime pauses for a significant period of time, and we have to reconnect at some future time. So it's not just about the ag aspect of it; it's about the personal aspect of it. So that's a family call. If you're trying to run a business in rural America, those calls that are business, that can't happen in those calls. We need so that's a capacity thing that hopefully this will help with. When you look at what's happening in precision agriculture, as GT mentioned, our irrigation systems, our pivot irrigation systems, they've taken a lot of data from moisture meters in the field, and they convert that data into putting water where water is needed, and not wasting the energy where water is not, or the resources where water is not needed. So I think that our data and the bandwidth that we are going to consume in rural America is going to continue to grow. I think it's going to grow exponentially in rural America, as it will throughout the rest of the world. And without this act, this Broadband for Rural America Act, I think we're simply going to fall further and further behind in the percentage of capacity that we have. And so I again want to commend GT for his work on this, and the staff for their work on this. And I think it's very important that we get the money into the USDA that is focused on rural America and the quality of life in rural America. And that's the best aspect of this bill, getting the money from FCC to the USDA.
Well, I'm not sure if we could end any more thoughtfully than that, but I'll give an opportunity for some closing remarks from the Congressman, and then I have a few logistical details for the reporters just before we hop off the call.
Well, I'll make it pretty simple and straight, actually. The Broadband for Rural America Act is our opportunity to restore a robust rural economy.
I think that's perfect. I couldn't agree more, and look forward to working with GT and the staff and Democratic colleagues to make this happen.